The U.S. attacking Iran. Iran now retaliating, a dangerous escalation in the war that's now on day 102. Tehran claiming it's firing missiles and drones towards U.S. targets. An attack after CENTCOM confirms the U.S. hit a number of targets in Iran. So this has been a back and forth. Multiple explosions reported now along the Strait of Hormuz. And it all started, Trump says, when Iran shot down a U.S. Apache helicopter as it patrolled the crucial waterway. And that was a significant strike, maybe at the hands of an Iranian Shahed drone, coming amidst a ceasefire that was broken 2 days ago, with missiles hitting back and forth once again between Iran and Israel. The president tonight telling ABC's Jonathan Karl that this is a response to what they did with our helicopter last night. And I believe the response should be very strong, very powerful. And that's what this was. Now, this is the first time in the war that an Apache's gone down by a country whose military, right, Trump claims to have obliterated. Certainly when it comes to things like the Navy and the Strait, it's been obliterated or left at the bottom of the sea many times, according to Trump. The attack coming just hours after Trump said the U.S. would be declaring victory in Iran in the next 2 weeks, and also that there was a deal, the cusp of a deal with Iran, which is a claim, in fact, that Trump has now made at least 38 times since the war began.
They're begging to make a deal.
I think they want to make a deal very badly.
Iran is dying to make a deal.
We're going to end that war very quickly. They want to make a deal so badly.
We're close to a very good deal.
We're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal.
Where does that deal stand tonight? Well, in a moment, we're going to take you live to the ground in Tehran. But first, I want to go straight to Kristen Holmes because she's out front live outside the White House. And Kristen, now a back and a forth happening in the Strait of Hormuz between the U.S. and Iran. I mean, what are you learning about the scope of the strikes this hour?
Yeah, Aaron, it certainly doesn't seem as though they're moving in the right direction in terms of some kind of a peace deal. But what I'm told is that right now there is a limited scope when it comes to these strikes. They're looking at military targets along the Strait of Hormuz, but we are told that they are expecting more strikes throughout the evening. Now, one of the things that we have been told was that this was meant to be somewhat of a warning shot fired to Iran after the downing of that Apache, and that they don't think long-term this is going to affect any of those negotiations. Now, it's unclear whether or not they noted that Iran was going to retaliate and retaliate so quickly. We saw a post from Iran's foreign minister saying that any strike from the U.S. would essentially be countered. Now, the U.S. is still maintaining that it is somewhat optimistic about these negotiations, about reaching a peace deal. However, it's unclear whether or not that 2 to 3 day timeline, which President Trump laid out last night, still holds. Of course, we had heard that kind of timeline before, and we are still in the midst of this no longer even ceasefire as the two sides are trading strikes.
Unfortunately, this ceasefire is beginning to escalate, and this is not what the administration wants. Trump truly wants a deal, and I actually think the Iranians want a deal. But until we can stop shooting at each other, nobody's going to come to the negotiating table. I've been saying for quite some time that the president needs to think about his kind of long-term strategic goals, and those should be, first and foremost, to get the strait open. The only way that strait's going to get open is if the president lifts the blockade under the auspices that the Iranians have got to open the straits, and then sit down and begin the long-term negotiations that are going to be required for the highly enriched uranium, the state sponsor of terrorism, and all the things that the Iranian regime has been doing that we want to put in better balance.
Yeah, and of course, the irony of what you say, the first strategic goal is to return to the way things were before the war started, at least when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz itself, right, with reopening that. It does come in the context of this deal, Admiral, where Trump, as I said, the number that we counted is at least 38 times over the past couple months. He has said that a deal with Iran was close to being finalized, right? There's a deal, and we know it often comes over the weekend. It comes ahead of the market opening. I played a few of those claims a few moments ago. But, you say you believe the Iranians also want a deal as well. How do you think they view, though, the reality that it is now very obvious to anyone on this planet that Trump really wants to make a deal?
Yeah, of course, one of the Iranian stipulations for coming to the negotiating table was for the fighting between Hezbollah and Israel to stop. And that has continued, which is why you've heard about the very contentious phone call that President Trump had with Prime Minister Netanyahu. You've seen the continual, bombardment going back and forth between Israel and Hezbollah. And of course, this is what precipitated the Iranian attack the other day and then the counterattack by the Israelis. So unfortunately, the president really has a lot of things going on here. He's got to convince the Israelis, yes, they have the right of self-protection. They need to protect themselves, but we've got to figure out a way to kind of broker some sort of ceasefire in Lebanon so that that can be one of the stipulations that we kind of take off the table. Then the next thing is, we've got to figure out a way where we convince the Iranians that we will lift the blockade if they open the straits, and then sit down and begin the long-term and the hard negotiations that will come.
Yeah, and long and hard, as you said, and with the prior deal, of course, we know it took years to get it done.
Right.
Now, Trump's claims of an imminent deal, as you know, Admiral, have been preceded by bombastic rhetoric that was unsettling to everyone, from both Trump as well as the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Here are just a few things that they've said to remind everybody of those moments where your heart would be in your throat many times in the early days of this war.
I had to do a little stopover in Iran, and we had to knock the hell out of them.
We negotiate with bombs.
We just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Death and destruction from the sky all day long.
That last threat from the Defense Secretary, death and destruction from the sky all day long, also comes in the context of Trump and the Easter Post, which of course is unforgettable, Admiral, where the president wrote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." I'm thinking in the context of the fact that you're writing a book in honor of America's 250th anniversary. What are the consequences on the world stage for an American president and the leader of its military, his defense secretary, to be speaking in this way?
Well, certainly the rhetoric doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help in the process of the negotiations. As I mentioned before, at the end of the day, Trump wants to broker a deal with the Iranians. And the deal has got to begin with opening the straits. And so he's got to get them to the negotiating table. He's got to provide some sort of incentive that opens the straits and brings the Iranians to the negotiating table. The rhetoric won't help. But to your point about my book, Duty, Honor, Country, and Life, it really is about the incredible soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that I worked with over my 37 years. And it's those same soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that are out there in the Gulf right now responding to the threats from Iran. So I hope when people read this book, they'll realize how incredible the young men and women of this country are, not just in the military, but frankly, everywhere I go in the country.
And that's an optimistic note, I think, that gives people heart. Your book is a collection of speeches, letters, even poems, frankly, Admiral, that you've written over the years, which I think is important and I hope inspirational to many young women and men. But ahead of the country's 250th birthday, at one point you write, keeping our democracy alive past 250 years will not be easy. It will require our leaders to be men and women of integrity, the same integrity that I saw in public servants who raised their voices against corruption, malfeasance, and the mistreatment of their fellow Americans. It's a poignant statement in the context of the moment in which we're having this conversation. Admiral, do you think American democracy is in danger right now?
Look, I am worried about American democracy, but American democracy has always been this grand experiment, Aaron. And the fact of the matter is, if we're going to keep the American democracy moving for another 250 years, then we have to expect better from our leaders. Our leaders that are in the administration today, the ones in the next election, and on and on and on. And not just at, we need to expect better from our leaders at the local, state, and federal level. That's what will move our democracy forward. That's what will keep it in place 250 years from now.